Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. And this week there are 5 of us who are going to share our favorite authors. And I just want everybody out there watching and listening to know how difficult that is for a group of librarians to narrow down their favorite authors to 2. That was a hard task. However, as you listen to us talk, if you think you would also like to read some of our favorite authors, as we talk, a book by our author will appear on the screen, and next to the book, it will tell you the different formats that title is available in. If an entire series is on the screen, you're going to get a general idea of the various formats that those books in that series may be available in. If you're curious or have a further question about how to get your hands on a book, you can always call your local branch of the Monroe County Library System to find out if you're interested in a specific book by one of the authors that we talk about. You can request your books online through our catalog that's listed at the top of your screen now, and that is for physical items, hardcovers, paperbacks, audio CDs, large prints. And you will also see some formats and platforms listed that are available digitally. Those include Overdrive, which you may also hear referred to as Libby, as that's the name of Overdrive's app. Overdrive offers ebooks and downloadable audiobooks. Hoopla offers ebooks, downloadable audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And RB Digital offers downloadable audiobooks and also magazines and week-long passes to Acorn TV and the Great Courses. And now let me go ahead and introduce who we have with us this week. I'm Jennifer Graneski, and I am the community librarian at the Dundee Branch Library. And our introduction question for this week is, who was your favorite author when you were a child? So this was hard because I read a ton, but I decided to go with one of the authors who I still have on my bookshelf to this day. In fact, a lot of her books are out of print, so I have tracked them down through used bookstores, and it is Noelle Streatfeild. I'm not sure how she pronounces her last name. She is a British author who published children's books. Her first book was published in September of 1936, and it's called Ballet Shoes. And all of her books focus on children, usually between the ages of 6 to about 11, who are involved in the performing arts or in a sport in some way. So Ballet Shoes, from what I've read, actually appears to be the first children's book set at a stage school. It focuses on 3 girls whose uncle is gone. You don't know exactly where he's at, but it seems to be he's involved in the war effort. And so he's gone, they're being taken care of by a caretaker, and she sends them to this ballet school that they're able to get a scholarship to. And one of them is an amazing ballerina and shows lots of promise, and the other 2, not so much. But one of them loves science and airplanes, and the other one is very funny and seems to enjoy acting. And so the story follows them, and then she has other books, dancing shoes and circus shoes and tennis shoes. They all have shoes in the title. Makes it easy for kids. I want more shoe books. And I don't know who put these books in my hands. I don't remember if it was a librarian or a teacher, but I loved them. And like I said, as an adult, I went through and tracked them all down. They're still super fun reads if you enjoy things like Frances Hodgson Burnett's Secret Garden or A Little Princess. I think that you would enjoy these as well. So that was my favorite childhood author. We also have with us this week Jen McCarty, who is a reference librarian at the Ellis Branch. And who was your favorite childhood author, Jen?
Not any easier than picking a favorite adult author. I am going to go with books I probably came into a little bit older, so maybe not so childhood, but R.L. Stine. And of course everyone knows Goosebumps, but I probably started reading him in late elementary school. I think Goosebumps became a thing when I was in 5th, 6th grade. But before he wrote Goosebumps, he had a series called Fear Street, and that was my jam. They were like horror books for kids. I mean, much like Goosebumps, but a little bit above Goosebumps. But I can remember every time I went grocery shopping with my mom, we would go down, the book things, whatever, at Meijer, and she would let me pick out a book. And there was a ton of the Fear Street books. And so I ended up with a lot of those. And I can remember just reading, like a book a day. And I mean, they're pretty big books, but I read all the Goosebumps, I read all the Fear Street, and they led me into other, mystery, suspense, and that's still stuff that I love to this day. So R.L. Stine had a pretty big impact on my childhood. So I'm going to go with R.L. Stine.
Excellent. I would have to look up when I think the Goosebumps books came out after I was in elementary school. So I didn't get in on the R.L. Stine stuff until I was a school librarian. I feel like they
popular. The Goosebumps especially, I feel like started coming out like when I was in like late elementary school, and you're a little bit older than me. So yeah, that would have been out of your age.
Thank you, Jen. We also have with us this week Amy Luck, who is a front desk staff person at the Dorsch Branch Library. And who was your favorite childhood author, Amy?
Well, this actually came pretty easy to me because I loved the Pippi Longstocking books when I was in elementary school. And I can still picture myself reading them in third grade, sitting at my desk. Her Astrid Lindgren was the author, and she is a Swedish author. So I'm getting feedback, sorry. I don't know why. But Pippi was, her mom died when she was a baby, and her dad was a sea captain, and one day he just kind of disappeared into the sea, so she lived by herself with a pet monkey and a pet horse, and she had a suitcase full of gold. Well, she had all kind of antics, and she got to know some kids in the neighborhood, so to say, but she didn't have any manners, and she, because she basically lived at sea with her dad all those years. So she's on her own, and she does a lot of funny things, and it was just fun because she could be silly, goofy, and just crazy. And even when my daughter was in middle school, I helped her do a Halloween costume with Pippi with her pigtails and sticking out. So, but I will always remember my love for Pippi Longstocking.
Those are still popular books. They seem to reissue them with new covers every few years. I feel like there might be an anniversary for Pippi coming up too soon, but I don't know that for sure. So don't quote me on that anymore.
Started in the 50s, so
okay,
they're pretty.
Maybe a 70, 75 coming up pretty soon.
So
thank you, Amy. We also have with us this week Jody Russ, the community librarian at the Bedford Branch Library. And who was your favorite childhood author, Jody?
Well, I have to say first that I'm glad to hear that you guys picked some authors who wrote things from a long time ago, because I didn't want to show my age completely in my reveal of, but I had a couple of things. First of all, I read everything that Judy Bloom ever wrote. She was always one of my favorites. Shel Silverstein was very popular in my house, and we did an awful lot of those kind of books. And my mother was very clever. So my mother also worked for the Monroe County Library System for nearly 40 years. And I didn't realize until I was an adult, and probably even in library school, that my mom had me read every Newbery winner that ever happened. She just brought them home, slipped them in with the pile of other stuff, and I read them all, and didn't know that until I was going through, you know, even in our own collection, what don't we have on our shelves and what do we have on our shelves. So I did always enjoy those. There was very few of those that I didn't enjoy reading, but I think if you just said favorite author, and it's not from like that's elementary age, like if it was earlier than that, I'd have to say Berenstain Bears actually, because my dad used to read Berenstain Bears to his preschool classrooms, and it was just, that was, to me, that was part of the story, was my dad reading those stories. So, because he could do voices and all kinds of stuff. So that was always fun. But elementary age, the stuff I really remember kind of picking for myself, Judy Bloom would probably be my go-to.
Judy Bloom. She's a classic.
Yeah.
Right.
I
She's
feel like
so
every
fast.
kid needs to get a Judy Bloom book in their hands. Thank you, Jody. And we also have with us this week Isabella Arnold, and Isabella is a processing clerk at our DOMI administration building. So she's one of the people that make sure that all of those new books that get shipped to the library system make it out and into our hands that are waiting for them. So Isabella, who is one of your favorite childhood authors?
As a kid, I read a lot of, feel really nerdy right now, but Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read all the Little House on the Prairie books multiple times. And just thinking about it, like why I picked those up, and it was because it was my mom's favorite, and I actually read my mother's series of them that she had growing up. And my mother works for the library system as well. And she was always reading when we were growing up, always had a book, multiple books. And so like to spend time with mom, like to get her, attention, you would sit and read with her. So I always would grab the Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie, Little House in the Big Woods, The Wilder Years, Farmer Boy, like all of them. I read them over and over just to like be close to her and to share like part of her childhood with me, even as I was little. And I just found them recently in my basement, and I was going to pull them out, even though I have a son. I was going to make him read, all the Little House on the Prairie books too. But I feel like that was like my main jam growing up, and I constantly revisited them. And yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I try and get my favorite books into my son's hands too, regardless of whether we make them gender specific or not. And he has read, I'll be talking about it later, but he's read Anne of Green Gables. I couldn't get him to pick up Ballet Shoes. I tried. I was like, you're going to love it. It's World War II. She loves airplanes. One of the girls does. Couldn't get him to pick that one up, but I did get him to pick up one of Noelle Streatfeild's other titles. I think maybe the circus one, and he read that one. Didn't fall in love with it the way I did, but he was like, yeah, that was great, Mom. So, and I also just have to give a shout out. Judy Bloom made me think of Beverly Cleary.
Yeah.
And the Ramona books and the Henry books and Ralph on his motorcycle, Ralph the Mouse on his motorcycle. Those ones I gave to Tony, and he read all of the Beverly Cleary books. Every single one.
I debated between Beverly Cleary and R.L. Stein.
Yeah.
Mr. Stein won, but I love Beverly Cleary.
And Ramona is still just as funny and gets into just as many scrapes and is just as enjoyable now as she was when I was a kid. It was great reading those with my son. All right.
Ramona is, if I can just say real quick, Ramona is Junie B. Jones from the past, right?
Yeah.
So like what kids like about Junie B. Jones now is what Ramona was in earlier days.
Yeah. If you got a Junie B fan and you haven't done Ramona yet,
right,
you need to, because
right.
Your child will love them and so will you. All right, thank you. And now we're going to move into our favorite authors in general, not just in our childhood. And let's have Jody get us started.
Well, okay. Jody didn't plan anything specific to say today, so I'm just winging this. So let's go with that. The two authors that I ended up sending to Jennifer, and this is one of those things that I thought not only is it difficult to do, I think in my mind, when you're trying to choose your favorite authors, like it's like listening to my favorite music, right? So what I listen to right now is probably different than what I listened to 2 years ago. That doesn't mean the people I listened to 2 years ago aren't still my favorite artists or my favorite authors in this case. But so it kind of goes, that's the problem of trying to pick your favorite author, is that if you're talking about your whole adult life, like it just changes so dramatically. So currently, I would say James Lee Burke and Charles Todd are two of my favorite authors. And interestingly enough, although their stories are very, very different, their writing style is very, very similar. So what I like about both of these authors is that their language is lyrical. That's how I would describe it. Like you feel like you are in their locations. You can feel the surroundings when something important is building up to happen. You feel all that tension, the way that they describe things. Like James Lee Burke is just a master at describing minute details of things that make you truly feel everything that he is talking about. So Dave Robicheaux is his series that I like the most. He writes a couple of different series, but Dave Robicheaux are the ones. And the Neon Rain that I see Jennifer has up on the screen is the first one in that series. I don't think Monroe County owns that title anymore. I think I had to Melcat that one. I actually bought my own personal copy because I wanted to make sure that I had, you know, access to the whole series. But listening to him on audio is also wonderful. He does change narrators at some point through this series, but they're still both equally good. And now I should have looked up who reads those, because it's an actor and you guys would recognize his name, and it helped, you know, at least the newer ones. But anyway, Dave Robicheaux is a police officer who's a recovered alcoholic, and he was in Vietnam, and he's got some PTSD from that, and he falls off the wagon a couple of times throughout the series, and you see bad things, you know, you see those bad things coming. But he is in New Orleans area, and so there's an awful lot of descriptive, like I've never even been there, but I feel like I would know the locations if I went there because of how well he describes things. And one of the books, which is much later in the series, is about New Orleans being devastated by Katrina, and you could tell, like, he actually had to move out of the area because he couldn't stand the devastation that his area had undergone and the fact that it would never be rebuilt the way that he wanted it to be. So just the way that he wrote about that stuff was just very, very moving. So anyway, Dave Robicheaux, police officer in New Iberia, Louisiana, which is just a little area near New Orleans. And then Charles Todd, I actually talked about his series in an earlier Literary Libations. He has two different series that he does. Ian Rutledge is one of them, and then Bess Crawford is the other one. These are based just after World War I in England, or in the UK, really, because he does travel to other areas. And he is a detective for Scotland Yard and also suffering from PTSD, although they didn't call it that. But wow, does that say something about me? I don't know. That's interesting. And this is maybe showing my age. The Charles Todd books are cleaner. There's not language. There's not, again, they're written in the World War I time frame, and so they wouldn't have written about things that were, you know, written about these days. So Dave Robicheaux stuff gets pretty dark and pretty intense, and pretty descriptive. You know, obviously these are both murder mysteries, and so some of that stuff is more graphic in the Dave Robicheaux series. Charles Todd is not like that for any of his writing in either the Ian Rutledge or the Bess Crawford. I also wanted to give a shout out, though. I mean, Janet Ivanovich just makes me laugh. If I need something fast and easy to read, I mean, I feel like I could pick up One for the Money again and start them all over again. And I'm not up to date because I don't go out and grab the newest book as soon as it comes out. I just, when I see it on the shelf, oh, I didn't read that one yet, I grab it. But I tell you what, Grandma in that first book, when she pulls out her gun and shoots the turkey on the Thanksgiving dinner table, I really, it was the longest and hardest that I've laughed reading a book that I think ever. But and I also really enjoy Sarah Paretsky, who does V.I. Warshawski is her main character's name, and she's a female private investigator in Chicago, and just all of her books are filled with strong female characters. I mean, obviously V.I. Warshawski is one, but other people that surround her are also strong female characters. And I mean, who doesn't love a good story set in Chicago anyway? So that's what I would have to say.
Thank you, Jody.
Janet Ivanovich too, I just want to throw in there. That's one that I know, like, crosses so many generations. I can remember my mom and my grandma and I would all be reading those like at the same time, and and we all related to them, you know. And it's yeah, those are just a lot of fun.
Yeah, they really are. I meant to mention just a plug for library resources. We have a resource called Novelist that is available, and anybody can get to it off of our homepage. But if you need help, you know, if anybody out there needs help with that, please call one of our branches. We'd be willing to help you. They've got a great feature on there. If you like this author, try this. So if you feel like you've read everything by one author, you can get some good recommendations for other authors. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to throw out there. It's a good resource.
I just need more time to read. You know, I feel like I plug reading in wherever I can. I listen. I've got a shower speaker. I listen in the car, and that, you know, I'll read at night before bed and usually make it a few pages depending on the book. But I just need more time to read, because I feel like I would love both Charles Todd and I want to say Dave Robicheaux, but it's not Dave Robicheaux. James Lee Burke. I would love them both. I love mystery series, but I don't know when I'm going to squeeze them in with my other, you know, stack of books that I got sitting.
Right.
So, but I love having new ideas. Thank you, Jody.
Sure.
Let's have Isabella share next. Your favorite authors, Isabella.
So my first author, I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, why do you like him? But it's J.D. Salinger, and I feel like he has a bad rap because of Catcher in the Rye. Like, I mean, it's a good book. Like, yeah, I understand. It's a lot of controversy about him. I get that. But that's literally probably like my least favorite book out of his 4 published books. But so Frannie and Zoe, I try to read it at least every year, every 2 years. One thing that So many words. So in J.D. Salinger's like collection, he has 3 books called Frannie and Zoe, 9 Stories, and Raise High the Roof Beans Carpenters and / Seymour and Introduction. And those 3 books all center around this glass family. Well, 9 Stories kind of is all short stories and goes to other people, but they're in there. And it's this family. And I believe there's 5 children, and they're all so smart. Like, they're quiz bowl kids. They were all on this radio program, and they were the longest running contestants in this quiz show, and they're just so smart. And they have so much drama and complicated personas. And one like theme that really runs through them is this kind of like Buddhist like ideology of like, you can't reach for perfection and enlightenment. You just have to like go along this path. And they're kind of also, they feel like they're too enlightened, like they know too much to be normal. And they're just really fascinating to read about. And Frannie and Zoe is two of the siblings. In the beginning, like short novella, Frannie is at college, and she kind of suffers a mental breakdown. And then the second part of the book, which is about Zoe, he is an older brother to Frannie, and he is at their New York apartment and sees her having this breakdown. And it's just kind of, it's over like the course of a week, I believe this novel is set. And it's just kind of him helping piece together like why she's having this, what's going on, and then how to use kind of religion to get through it. And I just thought it was fascinating and kind of really, like I felt like I hadn't read books about this type of stuff before. And I feel like J.D. Salinger was kind of writing about religion and the psyche and mental breakdowns kind of before a lot of people were, because this was definitely in the 50s that he was writing these books and these short stories. And he was like a very spiritual man himself and believed in lots of ideologies. And he was, in a quote I was reading last night, his daughter said that he would constantly like go away for a week to write a book and then come back and have a new ism to follow. And yeah, like, and he would devote himself to it. And so I just really found this whole family fascinating to read about and to learn about, and kind of how they incorporate all these different teachings into their life. Like one of my favorite things that's in, is it Seymour, an Introduction, I believe? And they were talking about how Seymour was the best. He was the oldest brother. He was the best at marbles. And he just would come up and he would just shoot his marble, and he wouldn't even look where he was shooting it, and he'd be surprised when he won every single time. And it kind of follows this teaching of you can't aim for things, you just have to be present and just like allow things to happen. Which I just was like, oh, that's me. And so then every time I bowl, I don't aim for the pins, I just let it happen. And then I get strikes, and it's amazing. And I just feel like Jody Salinger is helping me bowl every single time. Yeah, and so I feel like it's a pleasant surprise. I mean, not everybody's going to like him. Not everybody will like it. But I just really enjoyed reading him. I didn't discover his backlog collection until I was in college, and I had to take an English class that like was subtitled "Death and Dying in Literature," and so we read Frannie and Zoe and 9 stories, and it was just, I can remember reading it and thinking, this is phenomenal. Like, this is so good. And then like my fun fact about these books for me personally is, so I lived in New York for a few years after college, and I was reading Frannie and Zoe, 9 stories. I was reading both at different times, and there was one day I had 9 stories with me out and about in New York, and I was at a coffee shop reading it, and one gentleman stopped by and was like, 9 stories. Have you gotten to this story yet? Like, that's my favorite story, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's weird, because people don't talk to each other in New York. And then I went to see a show, and I was reading my book in the lobby before the doors opened, and another person came up to me and was like, oh, have you read his biography? It's so good. Like, have you gotten to this story? Like, I love Teddy in that story. I was like, well, that's weird. Like, 2 people in one day. And then I was on the subway that night, and I was reading my book, and another person came up to me, oh, you're reading J.D. Salinger. Have you gotten to this story? This is my favorite story. And so it's just so bizarre. And one day, 3 strangers came up to me to talk about J.D. Salinger. Yeah, and he kind of, he's a weird guy. Like, he worked in a shed and just wrote books, and supposedly he has 15 novels that were not published. And that they're going to be all published posthumously, like through his son and his last wife. Like, they're working to like publish all of these things, and short stories and novellas and novels. And it's just, I hope it comes out in my lifetime.
That would make me so nervous. Does it make you nervous for posthumous publishing? Does that make anybody else nervous for your favorite authors? Because I'm like, maybe there was a reason they didn't want it published. Because the one I'm thinking of is Harper Lee. When they published Go Set a Watchman, and I read it and I was like, I'm just going to pretend this book doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Mockingbird exists. Go Set a Watchman.
She didn't want it published, because
right. Well, that's kind of what I thought. I haven't heard anything about Salinger and what they're doing with his, but that makes me nervous.
He had everything very meticulously organized, and if it had like a red label, it was to be published as is with no corrections, no edits. Like, that's how it's going to be published. And if it had a blue label, then it could be edited. And so supposedly he was very like, this all will be published after I die, and then this is how you're going to publish it. So I feel like that's kind of, I can't wait. But also, like, one of the quotes in Catcher in the Rye is, or maybe it's, I don't know which one it is. He said, I wish I had the courage to be a nobody. And I feel like that also just really, like, it's him. Like, he wants to be a nobody. He wants to just work in this shed and not have he wants no recognition. Somebody once tried to like shake his hand for like writing great books, and he was like, no, don't touch me, I'm nobody. So I just find it interesting. Yeah, so there's that. But don't get me wrong, Catcher in the Rye is difficult. It's very difficult. But read everything else first, and then you like appreciate.
I saw your face, Jen. Jen was not a fan of Catcher in the Rye. I read it, and
I don't get the appeal.
apparently it didn't make a big impact on me because I read it, and maybe I just wasn't old enough to grasp some of the concepts, and just was like, okay, Holden Caulfield, I like your name.
Yeah, that's one of those books for me that, like, some people just love, and I'm like,
Yeah.
It's a book that I read.
But that's the only thing by Salinger I've ever read, was that. So maybe I need to get Frannie and Zoe on my list.
That sounds better to me.
Yeah. Love it. And so then also on a whole nother side, Frederick Backman is my favorite too. And it was really easy for me to pick my two favorite authors, because these are two men that I have literally read everything they've ever written, and I've loved everything they've ever written. So I was like, oh, done. These are my two authors. Like, it's easy. Like, I'll sign up for this top. So Frederick Backman, he's Swedish. He's great. Everything about him makes me happy. This is a shorter, like a novella book that he wrote called Things My Son Needs to Know About the World. And it's just short little chapters. It's so, like, honest, and just little things like how to win at this, like, computer game, why sometimes a dad might hold on to his son's hand just a little too tight, which made me cry. What else? The reason starting a band is crucial to cultivating and keeping friendships. Why airports explain everything about religion and war, and how to find the team you belong to. And it's just like, they're cute, they're awesome, and like I plan to reread it all the time and read it to my son. And it was just like a fresh book when I read it. It was like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, but I didn't know I needed this. And then everything in his catalog I love so much. A Man Called Obey, Ooh, Ah, whatever it is. Britt Murray was here. My grandmother told me to tell you that she's sorry. Beartown, didn't know I wanted to read about hockey, but I did, and I loved it. It was such a great book. And then the sequel to that, This Is Us, such a great book. Or This Is Us. Us Against You. This Is Us is a TV show. Us Against You is the sequel. But yeah, I feel like he writes about topics that, like, I didn't think I would want to read about, like, especially the hockey one. I was like, no, I watched roller hockey growing up for my brothers. I don't need to read a book about it. And then you can't stop reading. You get this feeling of, like, falling into the book. And it's like, I can't read this fast enough. Can my eyes move faster? And then you have to, like, stop and, like, look at something else. Because you're like, oh, my brain is so, like, spinning because of how good this book is. And yeah, he's just, I feel like, a delight. I look forward to everything that he publishes. It's always quirky, and you fall in love with all the characters. And he just writes about, like, everyday life. And then it's just everyday life, but with such deeper meaning. Like, A Man Called Obey, that's like my new, like, slashes through all of them. It's just an old man on the surface. You're just like, oh, it's this cranky old man who gets mad at people, like, recycling. Like, okay, here he is. But really, he's just a man who just misses his wife so much that he just can't go on. And it's just, oh, I cried hysterically while reading that. And I often read in public places, and then I realize, like, oh, I need to adjust my face because I'm ugly crying, and people think that something is terribly wrong with me, but it's just a book.
Just want to read. And he has a new one coming out.
He does.
Fairly soon, maybe this fall.
September. Yes,
okay.
On the list.
And I'm sure it's in the catalog, so if you love Frederick Backman, you know, get on the list or call your library and we'll put you on the list.
And that one, right when I read it,
I don't know the title of it.
It's Anxious People.
Okay.
I believe is what it's called. And I read the description, and it's about, I believe, like, a bank robbery, and all these people are just in this bank. And then you kind of learn all these backstories about him. And when I was reading the description, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound very good. But then it's like, can't wait to read it. Like, I can't wait. Because he's just, I feel like I can't, you just have to read one of his books. It's light, it's I mean, it's light, but it's also always so deep and so sad and so beautiful. Like, he's great. I love him.
He is
And
great.
I just want to go to IKEA and buy all new furniture and assemble it, and eat Swedish cookies. Yeah, those are mine too. They're so different, and yeah. Bye.
Thank you, Isabella. And let's have Amy share her favorite authors.
Okay, and like with Jody, I had a hard time picking because it might be different from one genre even to the other, and there's so many genres, and I read everything, so I had a lot of favorite authors. But I chose Linwood Barclay first because whenever he's got a new book coming out, I'm on the list as soon as it gets out because his books are just that good. They're fast reads, they're suspense, they're thrillers, but he also writes with a little bit of humor. So you get to know all of the characters really well and you're not sure what's going on. And there's a lot of twists and turns, and it's one of those authors when I start reading, I can't wait to get back to it if I have to stop. His first book I read, just picked up by accident several years ago, is called Bad Move. And it's about a writer. He writes for a newspaper, like science fiction or something. And his wife is she's a businesswoman. They have 2 teenage children. They live in the city. And he's just getting frustrated because of the crime and just the crowdedness. So he makes them move to the suburbs. And they get to the suburbs. The kids didn't want to move. The wife didn't want to move. But there's this beautiful new suburb being built. And he's like, yep, I want my family safe, so I'm going to get you out there. Well, they get out there. There's a murder practically in his backyard. The neighbor next door has a marijuana growing business in the basement. The lady across the street is a dominatrix, and they all sound kind of like, wow, but he writes with such humor that it's not tackily, the dominatrix. You end up liking her because she's just a good person, but that just happens to be her business. And it's just funny the way he writes when he finds out what she is. And so it's definitely not a good move. The kids are like, are you kidding, Dad? Well, they do in the second book end up moving back to the city because, it just isn't all it's cracked up to be out there in the suburbs. So it was just funny. Serious topics, but funny. And he wrote that one a long time ago. As he progressed in his writing, it just got better and better and better. He does have one series that is set in Promise Falls. And I'm like, and those all kind of go together, but he has a lot of standalone novels too. And there's so many darn twists and turns that you think you've got it figured out, and then bam, something else happens. But he writes so in depth about the characters that you really get to know each of them. So I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I keep an eye on him, and if there's one coming out, I'm 1 or 2 on the list to get that book. Unfortunately, they're not on audio at all, and I do like to listen in my car and on my phone, but that is one book for sure I'll make time to read in a hard copy. So everything he writes is just really good. He wrote one called No Time for Goodbye, and this 14-year-old girl wakes up one morning and her whole family's gone. Her whole family is gone, and no sign of them anywhere or anything. She doesn't know what happened to them, where they went. Well, then, about 10, 15 years later, things start coming back. and she starts to figure out where this family went and why they left. And that's quite a thriller. You just can't wait to find out what happens next. So if you like that kind of book, he is really a fabulous author. So we've got quite a few. Elevator Pitch, the book that is up on the screen, is in a big city. Elevators just, well, on Monday, an elevator, a few people get in, they go all the way to the top floor, and then it just drops to the bottom. And they think it's a freak accident with this elevator. Well, on Tuesday, it happens in another building. And then on Wednesday, it happens in another building. So they're frantically trying to figure out who's sabotaging these and how they can possibly get to it, because they're protected quite heavily. So it's just intense. You just want to know what happened, and it's really hard to put down. I could easily read this in a couple days. So that would be my first author I chose. And then I tried to go to a totally different genre, because actually I do like suspense and thrillers, so I have a lot of favorite authors in that top. But he is one that I definitely get the first book as soon as it comes out. So Joshalyn Jackson, she writes a lot of Southern fiction and domestic fiction, and she's got a lot of humor in her stories too, but you just love her characters. You just absolutely love them. Never Have I Ever is getting more into the psychological fiction, but most of them, they seem like just a regular story about someone living at home with their grandma and grandpa, and then all of a sudden you start finding out things from the past, and you're like, whoa. So in Never Have I Ever, this woman is living with her husband and baby and a 14-year-old stepchild, and she's living in a nice neighborhood. She's on the PTO. She is in a book club with the ladies in the neighborhood, and she's got this perfectly written life, and she's loving it. Then one day, someone moves into the neighborhood and joins their book club, and she starts a game with them called Never Have I Ever. So at one book club meeting, she gets them all drinking a lot. They're drinking a lot of wine, and she says, oh, let's play this game, Never Have I Ever. And you have to say the worst thing you've ever done. Well, everybody thinks it's a funny joke except the main character. And she's like, oh, Lordy, I can't do this. Well, her perfect little life she built is starting to unravel. And you find out some things she did when she was younger. And this person that joined had something to do with it. And she was now threatening her, like, are you either come up and come out with it, or I will get you. So it's like, whoa, but again, mostly Southern characters. And the newest book, well, that's her newest book, Never Have I Ever. But just all of them, they're all standalones. You don't have to get caught up in a series. So if I find myself in between my requests and just want something good, I can also go to her on Hoopla or Overdrive and listen to one of her books. And she often reads her own books too on the audio. So I'm listening to one called Someone Else's Love Story right now, and she falls in love with a man during a robbery at a convenience store. So there's always a lot of complications with it. She's got a 3-year-old little guy who she thinks was born out of immaculate conception, like she never had sex. Everything, when the doctor said, well, everything's intact, so and she it is funny.
Well, now I'm gonna have to go and read that one, Amy, because I want to know what the answer is to that, because I feel no.
And so she meets this guy, and he kind of helps save her son, so then she's in love with him. And that is the point where she actually realizes, oh my gosh, this was not a miracle baby. Something really happened.
Probably something traumatic.
It's it's like she picks topics that are just something you wouldn't every day hear. And this is a woman who just truly believes she did not have sex, and that baby is a miracle. And that's how she believes until this holdup in the store. So I don't know the ending to that yet, but it is very, very good.
As soon as we're done here, you're going to go finish it, right?
I get in my car and listen to it on my way to the Dorsch building.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
Oh.
And we're going to have Jen share her favorite authors now.
Okay. If you have been following along with Literary Libations with Librarians, you have heard me personally mention both of these authors and possibly one of the series, but I'm going to talk about them again because I love them that much. So the first is Jim Butcher, and he's one that I have definitely talked about. His most popular series is the Dresden Files. And if you're not familiar with these, you should be, because they're awesome. So Dresden Files follow Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. I want to get all the cool names in there. He is a wizard for hire. Like, the first book particularly sets it up where he's basically kind of like a PI, but he's a wizard. He's the only wizard in the phone book. That's kind of like the joke of the first one. So the first book is called Stormfront, and it really sets up the series. He gets called into, he has a friend on the Chicago Police Department who calls him when things are unexplainable. And in the first book, they have somebody who was killed very, very gruesomely. It looks like his heart exploded out of his chest. And there's no conventional way they can explain this. So they're like, well, what the heck? Let's call that crazy wizard. And of course it is magic that happened. You know, that's the reason what killed this man. And they're afraid it's going to happen again. And so he basically gets pulled into, it's a mystery, really, especially the early books. He's more like a PI than, he just happens to do magic. But as these books progress, the characters get crazier. There's vampires, there's werewolves, there's fairies, there's all sorts of supernatural things that get interwoven in here. And Harry is always sort of this reluctant hero. He has a helper named Bob who, and I can't remember offhand. I actually just said last night that I was going to reread all of these because the latest book came out. It's called Peace Talks. And my brother said, go back and read the last like 4 or 5 books. And I went, well, if I'm going to have to read the last 4 or 5 books to catch myself up, I'm just going to read the whole dang series. But Bob is like a spirit who lives in a skull. And Bob is wisecracking and really funny. And I can't even do these justice. They're just so good. And they're fun. They're quick reads. If you like anything kind of supernaturally, even if you like mystery kind of stuff, like there's definitely that sort of mystery suspense element to it along with the supernatural. So I love this series. But the reason I ended up picking Jim Butcher as a favorite author over some other people who write very similar stuff, in addition to Dresden, he has a couple other series. My personal favorite is it's the Codex Alera series. The first book is The Furies of Calderon. And it's completely different than the Dresden Files. It's actually more like high fantasy. And so that one follows in this world everybody has at least one sort of elemental power. Some people have, and they make like, they have like an affinity with different, more like nature spirits. So, hey, I can do things with water, or I can do things with fire. Some of them can do things with more than one. And the main character's name is Tavi, and he doesn't have any, which is like unheard of. How do you, I mean, you were like the lowest of the low because you don't have anything. And of course it follows him and he ends up being extremely powerful, and there's a whole, series there. But if you like fantasy, The Furies of Calderon is incredible, and it's very, very different, and it's so different from anything else that Butcher has written, but I love them both. So that's Jim Butcher. Highly, highly recommend him, either The Dresden Files or Furies of Calderon. My second author is Meg Cabot, who a lot of people know her from The Princess Diaries, which I also love. But one of my favorite of her series is a little less well known, the Mediator series. And the first book of that is, I don't remember. I know we don't own the first book, so that's kind of a bummer if you're wanting to go back and read them from the beginning. I know the MCLS doesn't have the first book. Hopefully once Melcat gets operational again, you could get it that way. But they're really good. These books are actually fairly old. Meg Cabot, they were one of the first books that she initially wrote under a different name. They were originally written under Jenny Carroll. And there's like 6 or 7 in the original series. The book that's on your screen, though, is called Remembrance. And it actually is one that she wrote really recently. The original Mediator series was like YA. It's a teen character. The main character sees ghosts. And so she's always been really reluctant to be around old places because older homes, older buildings tend to have more ghosts. Her mom gets remarried and they move from, I believe, New York to California. And they move into this beautiful old home that her new stepfather has been restoring. And of course, there's a ghost that lives there. And his name is Jesse, and he's kind of a cowboy-ish, like original settler kind of feel from California. And he's died some kind of traumatic death. They don't really know exactly what happened to him, but he lives in her bedroom and he won't leave. Which, teen girl now has a teen boy that's dead hanging out in her bedroom. Things get a little bit awkward. But her fans loved this series so much that they kept saying, write more, write more, write more. So finally she decided, fine, I'm going to do it. And she wrote Remembrance as them as adults. So she has grown up. The ghost, there's more to that. I don't want to give anything away. But what's great about this book is it's an adult book with these characters. You could pick up Remembrance without having read the other books. I think she does a good enough job filling you in on kind of what happened, where they're at, why they're here. But this Remembrance is a really nice sort of love letter to her fans that love this series. And it wraps it up and it brings them into the adult world. And the main character, and I'm totally blanking on her name right now. I think it's Jessica, but I'm not. No, it can't be Jessica because his name is Jesse. It's Susanna. Thank you. I remembered it. She's very typical, like she's just getting out of college and doesn't really know what she's doing with herself. It's so fun to have like sort of grown up with these characters, and now this is an adult, and she wants adult relationships, and of course the ghost is still there, and maybe he's a ghost, maybe he's not anymore. Things happen. But I love Meg Cabot. I love her books. I love The Princess Diaries. I love all of her YA stuff that she's written. And she's done some adult stuff, which I love. She's got the Heather Wells series, which is very light murder, mystery, romancy, super fun. She's written Insatiable is a book that I think she kind of wrote as a little bit of a joke to the fact that vampires suddenly became super in vogue. So after Twilight and all of that, she wrote the series. I think there's 2 or 3 in that. The first one is Insatiable. I think the second book is called Overbite. And it kind of makes fun of the vampire series a little bit. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's still really, really good. All of Meg Cabot's stuff is fast and light and funny and fun, and I haven't read anything by her that I don't just love, and it just makes you feel good. So those are my authors.
I feel like in times like these, sometimes we need those fast, light reads right now too. And also Jim Butcher's sound very entertaining as well with all the humor that's in there. Thank you, Jen. And now I will share my favorite authors. And as many have mentioned, this was really hard trying to decide what makes a favorite author for me, because I have authors where maybe I've only read 1 or 2 books by them, like George Orwell. But when I read 1984 and Animal Farm, like those ideas kind of just blew my mind. And I still think about them now, even though it's been lots of years since I originally read those. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to all of my horror authors, my Stephen King, my Joe Hill, and my more recent authors like Grady Hendrix and Paul Tremblay and Octavia Butler. And I didn't end up picking them because I was like, well, you know, I haven't read everything by them, sometimes because they're so prolific. So what I finally did to decide is I went with whoever I had the most books of theirs on my own personal bookshelf. So I went over to the bookshelf, and if I had a lot of books by them, I was like, well, clearly they're one of my favorite authors because I've actually spent my money to get their books on my shelf. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Elizabeth George, and she writes the Inspector Lynley and Barbara Havers series. It is set in London. They work at Scotland Yard. And Inspector Lynley is also Lord Asherton, so he's definitely from the upper crust of England. And Barbara Havers is decidedly not. And they are complete opposites. And Barbara is constantly getting in trouble. She speaks her mind. She doesn't dress professionally. In fact, the book refers to her red trainers quite often because it sounds like, and I picture them as like Converse high tops that she's running around in. She likes wearing sweatpants and t-shirts because she can move in them. So she's constantly reprimanded, but she's really good at her job. And Inspector Lynley realizes this, and so he's partnered with her. And there are now 20 novels in the Inspector Lynley series. And anytime I say that, people usually are checking out as soon as you say, well, there's 20, but I think they're so worth it. If you love mystery series, these characters grow over time. And when you start, Inspector Lynley is not married. When you end at the point that they're at now, he has been married. Barbara Havers goes through her own relationship issues. They have family issues. Inspector Lynley has a brother that you learn about. Barbara's mother is very ill. So there's all this life stuff. And I started reading Elizabeth George. I just randomly picked up the 3rd book in the series when I was in college, and it's called Well Schooled in Murder. And I just wanted a murder mystery. This one happened to be set at a boarding school, which is like catnip for me. I don't know why I like books set at boarding schools. So I picked it up, read it, loved it, and started reading through whatever was available at the time. And since then, I've read every one that has come out. If you love really good characters in your mystery, where you are looking at their motivations, they feel very much like this is a real person with a complicated life and a complicated motivation for why they might be led to commit a crime. All of that is here. The surprising thing about Elizabeth George, after reading these, they did turn it into a BBC series for a few years. Elizabeth George is not actually British. She is American and was born in Warren, Ohio, and now lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. But she does a fabulous job on her research, and I don't know how much time she spends over in England, but I would never have caught on that this was an American writing these British books. They are not cozy mysteries. So if you're thinking this is going to be a Miss Marple, it's not Miss Marple. These are, there's going to be some language, and there's, you know, they're murder mysteries. There's violence. Some of them are quite dark, but great characters, her main characters that you get to grow with. 2 thumbs up all the way for Elizabeth George. The first book in the series is A Great Deliverance. So if you're interested in that one, call your local library. We'll let you know in which format we can get our hands on that for you. My other favorite author that I have tons of books for is L.M. Montgomery, Lucy Maud Montgomery, who is Canadian. And she wrote the Anne of Green Gables series, and I've talked about Anne of Green Gables before, so I won't go on and on about that again. But she also wrote the Emily of New Moon series. She wrote the Story Girl series. She wrote the Pat of Silver Bush series, and she also has lots of standalone novels. And what I love about L.M. Montgomery is her focus on young women who are imaginative and intelligent and creative and who have amazing friendships with other young women, and who look at life as an adventure. And they see the obstacles and the losses and the pain in life, and they see it as that's part of life. And this is how we move through it with wonder. And I think that's what L.M. Montgomery does so well, is a sense of wonder in all of her characters about the world that surrounds them. If you've read Anne of Green Gables, her most well-known, that's what Anne has. Even in the hardest of times, she's able to look around and go, the world is still an amazing place. And there's such a sense of comfort whenever I pick up an L.M. Montgomery book. And I enjoy L.M. Montgomery enough that I did go to Prince Edward Island, saw the Anne of Green Gables house. I was able to do that before I was married, and a group of friends of us all drove up there. And it's beautiful. It's a gorgeous area. Ellen Montgomery was born on Prince Edward Island. Once she married, she moved to Ontario. I hope someday she moved back to Prince Edward Island. That's what I'm going to think in my head, because it's a beautiful place. And she was made an officer of the Order of the British Empire in 1935. So yay, Ellen Montgomery. So those are my two favorite authors, at least for today, because if you ask me tomorrow, it might be different. So thank you to all of our librarians that shared this week with their favorite authors. I hope as you were listening or watching that you were able to write down some new titles and new authors that you're interested in. Thank you for listening to us. Next week, we're going to be talking about memorable memoirs and brilliant biographies. So if you are a biography memoir person, make sure to listen next week. Thank you so much, and have a good day, and bye.